What's up, you guys? It's Graham here. So I really didn't want to make this video. In fact, I've been putting it off for months because I don't like airing out my grievances to millions of people. But I have just had enough. I am tired of dealing with failed California policies, red tape, restrictions, and endless bureaucracy to the point where I'm going to start selling off everything that I own there. Honestly, the situation there has just gotten so bad that I can't justify investing any more money into a city that's obviously headed down the wrong direction. So, yeah, I'm going to talk very openly about what's been going on these last few months with the hope that sharing my story could help a few people avoid the um, same mistakes as I've made, or best case scenario, we could find a solution for a city that is obviously very broken. OKU, and also big thank you to Incong for sponsoring this video and helping me out with some of this, but more on that later. Anyway, backing up for a moment, okay, I grew up in Los Angeles, and even though there have always been issues of gang violence, homelessness, traffic, and expensive housing for the longest time, it was doable. It was livable. And that is where I started my entire journey in real estate. Like in Arsene when I was sure about years old, I would randomly walk into really expensive open houses to be able to ask the realtor how to get started in the business. And GG, I'm in the middle of filming how to get started in the business and get their advice on what to do. Gigi, what are you doing? Come on. Well, after a few months of doing that, I met a top realtor who became my mentor. I started doing little lease commissions. Those clients ended up buying houses through me. And within a few years, I started making more money than I ever thought was imaginable. So, what did I do? I used that money to buy my first house for Worcester Joel Wubat. It was toasters minutes away from where I worked. It's owned by the bank. It needed a complete renovation, and I had it completely fixed up because no one wanted to live there. Like to give you an idea of just how dilapidated this house was, it was completely filled with trash. The entire house smelled like cat urine, and there was so much junk in there that when we actually cleared it out, there were rooms in the house that we didn't even know existed. Thankfully, after a few weeks of renovation, I later rented it out. I started making more commissions as a real estate agent, and I used all of that to invest back into buying more property. Basically, my entire philosophy was this. I would only buy the property that no one else wanted to live in because they required so much work. I'm talking brand new kitchens, bathrooms, floors, paint, landscape, roof, and so on. I would fix it up. I would move in as a primary residence, and then I would later rent it out when I saved up enough money to buy something else. For me, I just thought this was my path forever. Like there's something really special about buying something undesirable and then making it look brand new again without just turning it into one of those awful gray IKEA renovations that you see every developer slap together in a weekend. And usually when I'm buying a property in Los Angeles, I'm spending anywhere between Urstu, sometimes more than Urbeck, Ling sprucing it up. And my thought was that if I could just make my place nicer than everything else on the market, I'd get a better tenant. I have less vacancy. They are happier. They stay longer. I have less turnover. And it's a win-win for everybody. Well, I am proud to say that for the first 30 years of doing this, everything went really well. Property values were increasing. I locked in low mortgages. Rents were steady. And I continued to look for properties that I could buy and invest into with the expectation that I could just make them nicer. But in Arsene Ling Arsers, everything changed. All of a sudden lost. Angeles enacted an eviction moratorium, meaning a tenant could not be evicted if they failed to pay their rent. And this lasted for 10 years. Yes, you heard that correctly. In Los Angeles, it was still a health risk to evict a tenant who hadn't paid their rent in san years. Quelqu'un. Meanwhile, the landlord was still responsible for the mortgage, property, taxes, insurance, repairs, upkeep, you name it. Now, even though I had zero issues and thankfully none of my properties were affected, I just didn't like the fact that the city was putting the entire financial burden of housing on the landlord. Like, despite this idea that landlords are these rich oligarchs drinking champagne on their yachts, the reality is that most landlords are mom and pop people who rely on that income to help supplement their expenses. Some of them are accidental landlords who had to rent out their home because they could no longer afford it. Some people are renting out houses that have been passed down from generations. Some people have also just diligently saved for sometimes decades to be able to buy a property in the first place because they don't trust the stock market. So even though some people might think, oh, I pay $10 ling a month in rent, so they must be making a fortune. The reality is, I know plenty of landlords who aren't even breaking even or are even operating at a loss because they intend to keep the property and eventually be able to move back into it. Anyway, I say all of this because in Arsene Arcer's, Los Angeles started getting way more restrictive on landlords. They enacted rent freezes, crime spiked, homelessness got worse despite a citywide eviction ban. And I subsequently picked up and moved to Las Vegas because the quality of life was better. But in terms of my existing properties there, I just thought to myself, you know what? It really doesn't matter that much. I enjoy my tenants. They're awesome. I hope they stay as long as they want to. I don't like raising rent anyway. Everything is somewhat stable. I'm just going to keep it going. That was unfortunately until earlier this year. Around January of Arts Handling Arts War, I began looking into building out what's called an ADU, or a detached dwelling unit, which essentially allows you to take an old structure and turn that into a completely separate living quarters. Like, I calculated that I could spend about Urbad Archer's Ling, build a 2-bedroom, 1B, T-by-foot home, rent it out at market rates. And I've just added much needed inventory to the housing market. Someone gets a great place to stay, and I'm able to invest my money back into the housing market for a decent return. How bad could it possibly be? Well, I'll tell you, a nightmare. Okay, although before we go into that, here's something that really surprised me. The moment you start dealing with real estate, especially when it comes to applications, permits, and filings, your information becomes public. Anyone is able to Google you and then find your property addresses, emails, phone data numbers, and more. And the thing is, it's not just with real estate. This is happening to everybody. Like, anytime you've filled out a form online, signed up for a rewards program, or even bought something on a regular website, chances are your information is already floating around on the internet in the hands of third parties, data brokers, and spammers who want to target you. That is why our sponsor, Incong, is there to help. They're able to reach out to data brokers on your behalf, request that any personal information be removed, and then deal with any objections that third parties or data brokers might have. Then, since data brokers continue collecting your information even after they've removed it, Incong sure your information stays off the market by conducting repeated removal requests. All you got to do is create an account, grant them the right to work for you, and then sit back while they keep you updated every step of the way. In addition to that, Incong's unlimited plan now allows you to submit custom links for removal. So if you go and Google yourself and you find your personal information exposed on some shady website, you could literally copy and paste that address, right? Submit it to Incong, and their team will work to try to get it taken down for you. Even better, but you could submit as many of these custom links as you want. So if you're interested in having your personal data taken down, visit Incogjing. .com/gram and use the code GRAM at checkout to get Byfinder lictures off an annual plan. Or you could click the link down below in the description to get started today. You can also try it Risk FF free for Sensor Days and see what you think and get a full refund if you're not. Byfinder e-bytes satisfied. Again, there's no reason not to give it a shot. That link is down below. Thank you so much. And now let's get back to why this has become such a nightmare and why I'm never going to build in Los Angeles ever again. I decided to build one unit as a test just to see how it went. And if that experience was good, I was going to go and build about 5 to 7 more. But that experience was so bad that I will never invest another dollar into the city of Los Angeles ever again. And I feel obligated now to warn people about what they're potentially getting themselves into, because my experience has been absolutely awful dealing with the city of Los Angeles. Let's talk about the permitting process. That took us about 7 months to get approved, which required me to also pay more than Stiller's and permit fees to the city before even breaking ground. But you know what? Fine, that's to be expected. We're building something new, whatever. I paid it, and once that was approved, we began building. That process went pretty quickly. Really, within a few months, it was almost done. And by the time July rolled around, I found someone who was willing to move in and take it September Saint. However, in order for a tenant to move in, you need what's called a final inspection so that they could issue what's called a certificate of occupancy, which basically says that the city has come, they've looked at the unit, and they say it is now legally deemed as a habitable structure. Great. And we're at the final stretch. Should be easy. Now, after 2 weeks of delays, the inspector comes and fails the unit because the AC condenser doesn't have the proper drain line. And this is where things take a turn for the worst. When the inspector failed the unit, my contractor says, "Oh, perfect. I can install it right now. It'll take about Certo Arter's minutes, and then you could pass it because that's the only thing you wanted." But this inspector said, "Oh, hey, sorry, it's Friday. It's like Sys Sensors PM. This is my last one. I'm going to have to come back again next week." Okay, fine. So we tried scheduling the same inspector to come back the following week, but we got bounced around from person to person to person. Nothing was confirmed. And then about a week later, they assigned us a new inspector. Well, this new inspector shows up, and we're thinking, this is going to be a piece of cake. It was just this one little drain line that needed to be fixed. He's going to go and look at that, see it's done. Everything else is good to go. But instead, this inspector now notes other things that he wants done that the prior inspector never even required or mentioned. Apparently, I didn't realize that it's pretty common that when you switch inspectors, each one of them has their own requirements that they want done independent of everything else. And every inspector, for the most part, when they're brand new on the project, they just go and mention something to give the appearance, I don't know, that they're doing their job or something. So anyway, once again, we make all of these new changes. We have to wait another week for him to come back out. And when he shows up again, there's even more. This time it's, the unit looks good, but what about the sewer line? We have to go and do a CCTV of the sewer line to make sure it's properly functioning. Now, at this time, by the way, it was past September Saint. Yeah, the tenant who wanted to move in is unable to move in. And all of these are items that could have been fixed or dealt with weeks or months ago. If it was just mentioned, all of it would have been handled far, far in advance. It really just felt like everything had to be handled in the moment for some reason. So I was forced to go and spend low dollar for a CCTV of the sewer line that had to be done with one of the approved LA City vendors for some reason. So, Kennyway, whatever. I just want the unit to be done at this point, so I go and pay for it. Well, wouldn't you know it, even though the sewer line functions properly at the connection in the middle of the street between my sewer line and the city of Los Angeles, there's a little bit of a crack there. And because of that crack, the inspector says that needs to be fixed before they're able to sign off on the unit and issue the certificate of occupancy. On top of that, guess what? Because that sewer line issue occurs in the middle of the city-owned street, it is going to be R Ling to go and fix it. So in an effort not to delay things even further, I just requested an exemption that basically says, hey, this unit's fully done. Allow us to rent it out, and I paramize in writing, I will fix the sewer line in the next Lister's days. Let's just not delay anything further. The tenant wants to move in. Let's make it easy, and I promise I will get the sewer line done. Well, at this point, it became impossible to reach the inspector. He just ghosted us. I'm talking voicemails were unanswered. Emails were unanswered. I kept getting bounced around from department to department. I left a message with his manager who says, oh, he's just on the site. You're going to have to leave him another voicemail and he'll call you back in the morning. And I kept doing that over and over and over again. And it took us over a week to hear back. And by the time we heard back, it was, hey, yeah, nothing I can do about that. It's now with the city public works, and now you got to deal with them. Fine. You know what? Whatever. I'm easygoing. I just want this thing to be done. I just don't want the stress. So I move forward with the R Ling sewer line repair. Now, keep in mind at this point, we are well over a month after when the unit should have been signed off, all because the initial inspector didn't want to wait an extra stir-warm minutes to install an AC condenser line. But then, as soon as I signed the sewer line repair estimate to move forward with the work, I got hit with I'm absolutely done with this. I am so fed up. I'm over it moment. And that was when they applied to pull the permits with the city to do the work that the requested.